In a field outside Dudley, in the English Midlands, in the year 1712, there is a brass cylinder 21 inches across and nearly 8 feet tall. Inside it, a piston falls 12 times a minute. Every fall lifts 10 gallons of water 51 yards up a shaft and out into daylight. It is the first steam engine anywhere that will run day after day and do real work. It is also one of the worst machines ever built. It throws away roughly 99% of the fuel it burns.
Thomas Newcomen was an ironmonger from Dartmouth on the Devon coast. No authenticated portrait of him is known to survive, so he does not get a face here. What he built worked like this. Steam fills the cylinder. A jet of cold water hits the inside. The steam collapses to a fraction of its volume, and the weight of the atmosphere itself, not the steam, shoves the piston down. Then the cylinder has to be heated from cold all over again. That is the flaw, and it is enormous. Every single stroke, the machine boils a cylinder, chills it, and boils it again. Modern estimates put the thermal efficiency of an early Newcomen engine at about half of 1%. Later versions, improved by the engineer John Smeaton, reached perhaps 1%. Put it another way, for every 100 shovels of coal you feed it, 99 become nothing but warm air over a Staffordshire field. Any accountant looking at that machine should have strangled it inside a week. Nobody did. The reason is not the machine. It is where the machine was standing.
The engine at Dudley was not standing in a field in the abstract. It stood at the Coneygree Coal Works, directly on top of a working coal mine, and that single fact is the beginning of the whole answer. A colliery in 1712 produced enormous quantities of coal it could not sell. The small stuff, the dust, the crumbs, the fragments too fine to load and cart to a city, piled up at the pithead as waste. It had a name, slack, and it was worth close to nothing, because the real cost of coal was never the coal, it was the moving of it. So the arithmetic that would have killed the steam engine anywhere else simply did not apply here. Feed the thing rubbish. Let it squander 99% of a fuel that costs you nothing, because the 1% it does convert pumps the water out of the mine that produces the rubbish. The machine ate its own tailings. There is exactly one kind of place on Earth where a device that stupid pays for itself, and Britain had more of them than anywhere else.
Britain's coal was not merely abundant, it was shallow, and it was close to water. The great Northumberland and Durham seams reached almost to the banks of the Tyne, which meant coal could be tipped straight into a boat instead of dragged overland behind a horse. And in the 18th century, moving a ton of anything by sea cost a small fraction of moving it by road. London had been burning northern coal since the 1500s, long before any factory wanted it. By 1700, Britain was raising somewhere around 2.5 to 3 million tons a year. By the 1790s, more than 10 million. The usual figure is that by 1800, Britain produced close to 90.
Because nobody buys a machine to save fuel, they buy it to save people. And here is the second half of Alan's answer, the half that usually gets dropped. 18th century British workers were, by world standards, expensive. Real wages in London and Amsterdam sat well above what a laborer could command in Delhi or Beijing, where pay hovered near bare subsistence. High wages, cheap coal. That pairing existed almost nowhere else on the planet, and it completely changes what is worth inventing. Alan tested the idea on one object, the spinning jenny, Lancashire, the 1760s. He costed out what an owner actually earned by buying one. In England, the return ran somewhere between 24 and 59%, depending on the assumptions you make. In France, consistently and sharply lower. In India, where a spinner's day cost almost nothing, it was not worth buying at all. Same machine, same drawings, 3 different answers. The jenny was not invented in Lancashire because Lancashire men were cleverer than anyone else. It was invented there because that is where the sums came out positive. That
is a clean story, and clean stories in history are usually being propped up somewhere out of shot. So here is the strongest case against it. Allen's high wages come largely from London building accounts, and the historian Judy Stephenson went back into those accounts and found that many of the payments were not wages at all. They were sums handed to labor contractors, who took a cut before anything reached a workman's hand. Actual take-home may have been 20 to 30% lower. Jane Humphries pushed harder still. Spinning, the industry at the dead center of this story, was not a high-wage trade. It was badly paid work, done overwhelmingly by women and children. Her argument reverses the whole engine. Factories were built not to escape expensive men, but to harness cheap and controllable children. And Kelly, Mokyr, and Ograda pointed out that an employer does not care about the wage. He cares about the wage divided by the output, and British workers were also more productive. Mokyr's own answer is different again. France had the drawings. What France lacked was 1,000 ordinary mechanics who could bore a cylinder true.
For 60 years, the steam engine stayed where its fuel was free. The historians Kanevsky and Roby counted them. 95 engines built in Britain between 1710 and 1733, roughly 4 a year. Nearly all of them pumping water out of coal and tin. Then 442 more between 1734 and 1774. Smeaton, measuring everything obsessively, roughly doubled the efficiency. Then James Watt saw the flaw that had been sitting in plain sight since Newcomen, that the cylinder should never be permitted to cool at all, and condensed the steam in a separate vessel instead. Patent, 1769. Fuel consumption fell by something like 3/4. And that is the moment the machine stops being a colliery curiosity. Once an engine burns 1/4 of the coal, it can afford coal that somebody had to cart. It can go to a cotton mill in Manchester, onto a boat, into a town with no seam anywhere underneath it. The Industrial Revolution is not the invention of the steam engine. It is the steam engine walking off the coalfield.
So, why England? Not because the English were cleverer. That is the one answer the evidence flatly does not support, since almost every ingredient had existed somewhere else first. China had blast furnaces and had been mining coal for centuries. France had the science and, very often, the identical blueprints. What Britain had was a narrow accident of geology and price, a place where the fuel was worthless and the labor was not, and where those two conditions happened to overlap on the same island at the same time. That overlap worked as a nursery. It kept a hopeless machine alive for 6 decades, paying its way on waste coal, being tinkered with by men whose names mostly did not survive, until one day it stopped being hopeless. You have probably been told the Industrial Revolution began with a flash of genius. It began with an engine so bad that it could only survive in the one place where its mistakes cost nothing. Whether British wages were truly as high as Allen claims is still being fought over in the journals. The coal is not fought over.
If you want the argument itself rather than the summary, read Robert Allen's Global Perspective work against Jane Humphries' reply. They disagree completely. Both are careful, and that disagreement is the actual state of the field. This channel goes after the version with the footnotes still attached, usually at an hour when nobody else is awake. There is more of it here.